Welcome to Dawn Patrol. Today's crazy topic, relationships. It's a wild ride. Hold on tight. Watch out for drama clouds. Swerve. Woo! Crash landing. That's relationships for you. See you tomorrow. Dawn Patrol out.
All right. Good morning. Yeah, I was screwing around with different pictures to have in the background. Let's see if I can have part of it. Let's see. Yeah, you see the shapes and stuff in the back. So I was thinking about that conversation I had with Chad and Tim, and also in the past with Ethan and you, and we were talking about relationships. You were cleaning your car and you were kind of chiming in with your nuggets, which is cool. And I just thought it'd be a cool time since we only have an hour, and I wanted to kind of give as much time to be able to flush this stuff out. Do you have YouTube still going?
Do I have YouTube still going?
Yeah, I feel like there's some kind of echo. I'm hearing an echo on my end.
Okay.
Let me see if there's something I'm doing. How's that? Let's test it. No, I still hear it. I don't think it'll bother me. Oh no, it's gone. I think. What happened?
My YouTube's paused, so.
Okay. Yeah, I still hear an echo. I don't know where it's coming from. This is muted. Anyway, I guess this is like we haven't really had much problem with StreamYard, so I think it seems like it went away. Yeah, we've been blessed not having too many issues. Yeah, so anyway, back to what I was saying. The reason why I got all the shapes in the, I guess I should probably show that better. I don't know if I can or not, but anyway, the point is that like we kind of come into this space, right? And we're all these different shapes, and everybody's different. Like they learn different, they speak different, they articulate different. I was watching Daniel Gardner talking with Rigel and Sherry, and Ian jumped on. I didn't get to hear what he had to say yet, but I thought what Daniel said was pretty awesome because, on one hand, we gravitate towards people that sound like us or talk like us, or maybe we feel like we can relate to them better because of the way they communicate things to us. But then also, we're here because we want to expand something about our communication, and it was kind of making me think of all these different spaces outside of this space, right? So we have the TLC space, we have our work space, we have family, we have strangers, like they mentioned a homeless person the other day, and then church relationships. And we do communicate in different spheres differently, and we're more effective in those spaces, or I guess those that are more effective in those spaces are able to navigate the transition between one place to the next. And I think that if you go into like a poet, they were talking about that, or a philosopher, they're very similarly linked in a sense, the abstract thinking. If you go into that space, or if you go into your family space talking like that, are they going to be able to relate to what you're talking about? Now, some of them may be, because maybe they're wired that way, but if not, you're going to sound like a glanging what is it, a gong. Like it's not going to make much sense to them. So you have to kind of modify your communication apparatus to talk to them on the level that they're going to be able to receive what you're saying. And I think that's that to me is helpful, right? So like when we come into these spaces, same thing. It's almost like there's people that can think the way that we're thinking if you're of the philosophical mindset, or if you're of a more direct in communicating mindset, whatever it is, so you're trying to, like, when you're getting into, like, I'm talking to you, and like I'm talking to you based on what I think that you're going to be able to receive, right? And I don't think it's necessarily a hierarchy thing or anything like that. It's just that I know Scott, he's used these words before, he knows what I'm talking about. But for anybody else that may be on the outside, they're like, they're like, this isn't deep enough. I need more abstraction. I need to be more creative with my input on what they're trying to convey, and I feel like that's sometimes unfortunate. And I think what really triggered me was thinking about what Tim was saying, and this isn't any knock on Tim. I loved his input. God, it was so awesome just to hear, where he was at, and where he came from. But he was talking about homeless people, like not having anything, like they have a lot to say to each other, but we, might not have a lot to say to them. And I mean, I've spoken to quite a few homeless people. And I think what's fascinating about it is when, like, I put myself out there to have a conversation with them, I'm not, a lot of times it isn't, they're not drug addicts, or they may be, but a lot of times they have a lot to say. And some of their lives are very, I mean, they're fascinating, like they come from a place. This one guy was a scientist. He used to be a scientist. Now, could he have lied to me? Yeah, but I don't think so. Not the things he was talking about. I've met one of those guys on the street that seemed like he was a genius. I mean, this is the way he was communicating to me. It wasn't um it wasn't just words. Like, he wasn't just trying to impress me with words. These things were just coming out of him, and they were all connecting, not to me, but to themselves, and I could understand what he was saying. But those are like these special moments of engaging a random person, you know, and having a conversation with them, getting to know them, and dialoguing with them. And I think we do that here. I think that's what makes this space so special too, is all the different types of people. But if you stay in your own language bracket, I think it's hard for people. You're not relating, you're not really, So, like, if I try to go on to something, I try to be able to contribute in the way that the conversation is going. So it's kind of nice having my own channel, right? Because I can, we can talk about it in more of a direct. I like more direct. I like it to be more meaningful. I like it to be um, what it is. I don't mind people that are poetic. That's the other part of relationships, and all these different shapes, and the colliding with each other. Um, it helps me build my character on how to deal with other people. You know, so I just thought it was interesting, all these different areas and arenas that are kind of corridored off, and the way that we have to communicate in those arenas, and how to build relationships in those arenas, knowing that all these people are in the image of God. And that's what I keep trying to remind myself, is that if I disagree with somebody, or they're completely off base, or I think, wherever they're at, I just kind of like, I have to keep reminding, it's like being humble about my perspective on things. So, I don't know if you saw the title, and you had given much thought about it, but I definitely thought about how this can benefit our relationships here in this space, and why I think it's valuable, as opposed to necessarily family or strangers or coworkers or whatever. You know, um, at least right now in my life, I get more out of this because a lot of these people, I come around everybody here, you and all these guys, because they think about things that are deeper, they may communicate differently, and I have to process it through a different kind of matrix to understand what they're trying to convey. And sometimes I think they're sounding poetic on purpose, and sometimes I realize, oh, maybe that's just the way that that's how they communicate, you know. So I'm trying to find that balance between all of that. You know what I mean? So anyway, what do you think, man? I mean, I know you have experience with the differences in relationships at work and family and here, and you know.
Yeah. So, a couple things. First is I'm kind of introverted by nature, but over the years I've learned how to be more extroverted. So I can go into the different spaces and do okay, at least from the feedback that I've received. Now, inside my head, it's always kind of running things through the filter, and that's why it's so exhausting, and why I tend to be more of an introvert, is because I don't want to say anything that is going to be wrong, but it can be fun if I have the right energy level to be able to invest in going to a new space and engaging with individuals. In terms of the family, the thing that I've used over the years is, I think this is Christ saying you can't prophesize in your own hometown kind of deal, where your family, I've been with my wife for almost 30 years, married for 22. My son's 20 years old. Like, there's all this, like, baggage that they've seen as I have grown that is with them. So if I, start waxing poetic in front of them, they just see it as, dare I say, disingenuous to all the things that they've seen me do throughout the course of those, call it 30 years. So the tact has got to be different. And then, as far as growth, I think that's absolutely right. That's what I've gotten here, is meeting different people from different traditions, different claims to faith, and the interplay, not always with me involved in it, but just seeing how that works in a respectful, loving, kind way, which helps growth. So that would be kind of my thoughts on your thing there. And I did not get the title, or at least I'm not able to recall it. I did read it before.
Yeah, it was simple. It was just TLC: work, family, strangers, and church relationships. I did put a little more into the description. I wrote something down because I wanted to have, I wanted it to not be all busted up. So I kind of had to process it. But I put exploring the sacred design of human relationships across the physical and digital world. Together, we unpack the relational dynamics of 5 core environments, and I mentioned all those environments. And then I said, we aren't just analyzing social bonds, we're uncovering why God designed us to live in a true community where we gather. And I think you just said that. I think I definitely believe that I think the more hospitable people that are in this corner definitely do value the engagement that they have with the other person. And it isn't just a selfish one. I think they genuinely want to get to know people. And I think that's what's so cool about this particular space, is it gives us the opportunity to meet a lot of different people. You know, some we're going to gel with, some we're not, you know, and I think the ones that I don't gel with, I definitely have to work even harder to be more patient about where they are in their journey, you know, and yeah, so, you know, I might have ideas and what I believe to be accurate, and I don't. That's the thing about this is that I come here. I'm trying to remember how Daniel Gardner said this. It was pretty. I'm trying to remember how he said it, and I don't want to waste time trying to scrub through the video to find it. I didn't clip it or anything. I can't clip it or anything, but I didn't preset it up. But he was talking about something. I don't want to misquote him or misrepresent him, so I'll just speak for me. But it was kind of like, do we really want to understand what the person's saying? Do we really want to be understood to the person? You know, or do we want to make them do jump? You know, make her, you know, hurdle and jumping jacks and go over obstacles to try to understand what we're trying to say. If that's the only way we know how to communicate, then I guess it is what it is. But if we're able to communicate in a more specific and direct manner, it's going to be more, we're going to have more progress together. So, you know, trying to use other people's language when I'm with them and everything, I think is helpful. But if it, you know, if you stay in that one sphere, you know, where like the abstract sphere, if you stay in that sphere and things start getting ambiguous, you know, like it's like it just makes it hard. It makes it the dialogue harder. And that's why I think I've been so obsessed with literacy and words, and you know, why I feel like it's important to know what people mean when they use a word. You know, I mean, it's fun. I mean, I can understand. I see the draw to it. You know, it's fun to bring up something that's like you know, you're painting a painting. Like I paint paintings when I talk or tell stories or whatever, right? They call me a painter, but I also don't do it to make it difficult for you. And a lot of times when I'm saying things to people, I'm usually saying them, and then by the time I'm done, they understood the painting, not how do you feel about what I just painted. You know what I mean? Like it's different, a different thing. And I think it's different to gain knowledge is different. I come here to gain knowledge from other people as well, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to change my mind. I gain knowledge. I mean, it may, but I gain knowledge from people, but I also like to share what I've learned, and I think that's a pretty interesting dynamic too. Because if I can help somebody with something that I've learned, well, that's awesome, you know. And if they can help me with something they've learned, that's awesome. You know, I was kind of thinking about our conversation the other day, and the newbie was in the chat, and she was talking about how like these are like a bunch of her like brothers, and she's getting to hear, you know, listen to all the stuff that we're talking about with the housing market and all that stuff. Like that's cool, you know. I mean, okay, maybe the housing market conversation wasn't very deep as far as the relationship level, but we were building relationships talking about those things, and I think that's special, you know.
Yeah, I think that's right. I once heard proper communication is like a bunch of individuals that are standing around a pool, an empty pool, and we all have ideas to pour in the pool. And the first step in proper communication is that everybody feels comfortable, no matter how big their cup or bucket is, to dump that in for everybody to see. And so it starts with a sense of safety, or not even safety, there's a better word for it, but that everybody feels like if they dump their cup into the pool, they won't be ridiculed for it. Like even a rebuke will come with a gentleness that, you know, that doesn't prevent them from coming back and dumping more into the pool and in subsequent conversations. And then we all get to take out of that pool after, you know, as the conversation develops. And I think that's something that's beautifully done here, or at least what I have seen over the years be done. Have there been instances where, you know, there's somebody doing a cannonball and just messing it up? Sure. But I think for the most part that's the spirit that takes place. You know, this place where I don't know, what do you guys think? And hopefully some girls soon, you know, am I looking at this wrong? You know, all the, like you're saying, just getting to a place where, you know, you have a place where if things aren't exactly getting figured out properly, slow down, buddy. Somebody was coming up on me hard. But yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like the idea of you know, everybody putting into the pool and making it hospitable for them to come and put into the pool. You know, I don't want to be critical about what they're putting into the pool, you know. Um, I guess one thing I've also figured, I think I figured this out. Now, I'm not, again, I don't mean I figured it out like I'm a genius and this is going to solve all the world's problems. I think it is interesting to me that certain denominational traditions do draw types of people to them. Um, it seems like if it just I don't know or at least as of late, the people that I engage with that are more um, poetic and like the imaginary and you know, like there are traditions that obviously lean way into that. And so, like, you know, if you're drawn to that, um, and it's like I kid, you know, me and my mom have a running joke about squishy Christianity, you know, like when it's almost reminds me of like the name it and claim it stuff or you know, things like that. You know, it's like or the charismatic, you know, on the extreme side, you know, where it's all about the spirit, it's all about demons and angels, and you know, and it's like that's all it's talked about, and it's like almost like a higher that's the hierarchy, you know, is that conversation or the way somebody acts on stage or like how can I see if this person has the spirit in them, and you know, like it's like they have these cues, right, that kind of set this off, and people are attracted, certain people types of people are attracted to that. But I'm trying to figure out a healthy way for us to see that we're okay, we may be attracted to something because it is it's our personality. Like maybe the way I'm wired, the to me, the logical aspect of my tradition makes sense to me. Like it's hard for me to not, you know, part like, you know, you know, parse out the sovereignty of God, which just makes so much logical sense to me, and then twist it and say, no, this is definitely not how God would be. Well, I don't, I don't know, but to me, it seems like he doesn't. God doesn't talk out of both sides of his mouth. You know, like he is all the things that we fear as well as the things that we love. You know, and there's this perfect unity in how he uses these things in his way, and me being okay with that, instead of like, no, I don't think Jesus would be very happy that, you know, you called somebody out, or like, what are you talking about? Like, it's like you're pushing like this idea of, or some would say, if they don't believe that other person is even Christian, they'd say that's you're making of your own God, And I don't put God in a box, but I think he is pretty logical. I mean, I don't think he's gonna, I mean, Paul writes about all sorts of stuff when it comes to the discernment, and we were talking about the spirit and gifts and fruits, and like, yeah, there's some evident things like the fruit. You can see if somebody has these characteristics, this fruit of the spirit. Gifts of the spirit, maybe a little different. I feel like we're called to test these things. Like if somebody brings up a prophecy or says this tries to speak into your life, I do believe God can be a part of that. Um, to go overboard and dramatize it and be like, I really feel like God is telling me to tell you this. It's like, all right, let's go easy there. Like, I mean, unless you heard an audible voice saying, "Go forth and tell Brett, God saith the Lord." You know what I mean? Like that's a little different, But I know that that's not how they mean it when they say it, but it just comes off as different to me. And same with like tongues in a church, like if somebody speaks, like somebody's got to know what they're saying, you know, or praying in tongues. Well, it seems to me the way Paul's talking is that he's talking about praying in tongues, you alone with God, which doesn't confuse anybody. Nobody's going to come in here, overhear you talking and think you're crazy. So, but again, there are people that that are very emotionally beautiful, that have these experiences, and then when they engage in like even a community like this or even the outside world, it's hard for me to relate to those kinds of conversations. Just like I'm sure it's hard for them to relate when I'm talking about, you know, my free will and God's divine decree, like, what do you mean? I don't understand. That makes no sense. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm talking and rambling or here or what.
No, that's, I think it maps a little bit to what I talk about with the different flavors and the different doorways. I tend to lean towards the fact that I believe that God is sovereign and he's going to reach everyone, and all these different ways of finding a God that is both in and not. Like you can see God in everything, but he's also sovereign. He's also not. Like I don't think we can know all the things there are to know, which is why I'm so hesitant with you know the claims of certainty that one way is. Now, who knows? It could be because of where I am in my walk, and as I walk further and deeper, and as I get closer, if the Lord willing, I can participate properly in that walk, then maybe that changes. Because I don't know what to do with the claims of heresy that take place in Acts. And also, that's kind of, the book of Acts is kind of, I think it maps to what we're talking about here. These were guys that like thought that that Christ was going to materially lead them. Like he was going to be the one right there doing the thing. And they were jockeying for position in his court, you know, like they literally thought he was going to be there. And so they're struggling, and you know, the seeing how we're just past the day of Pentecost, like the Feast of Weeks. I was looking into that last night. But you know, and so they're seeing all this new stuff, right? And they're just blown away by how they see it mapping to prophecy, and what do we do now, and how do we move forward through this? Like, just the immense kind of, and then Stephen getting martyred, and then yeah, like, how can we know for sometimes I think the certainty is pride, and I know that that's what I have struggled with throughout my whole life. That's what my family knows I struggle with. So when I come to them touting, you know, things of a we'll say symbolic kind of thing. Okay, for instance, there was this moment where, I don't know, it was probably a year or so ago, where we were looking at mopeds for my son to try to find a solution for him. And I wanted to talk to him about us, like, what was the game plan before we show up to this dealership. And because my son was just getting frustrated, and I was trying to explain to him by understanding the goal of the salesperson and the goal of us, because we were going there to basically try to harvest some information, but we weren't going there to commit. But knowing that the salesman was going to fish us, and his goal was to get us to commit, to get us to sign on the paper and buy a moped, is a way of loving your enemy, right? I tried to explain that to him, but it just went over his head. He got way more frustrated with me because he felt if I try to give him the most charitable interpretation, he was just frustrated. He didn't see that he was going to get his ultimate goal in doing this thing. He was having a hard time being convinced that even performing this act was going to yield any fruit. So why even do it? And here I am trying to bring, you know, love your enemy into the thing. It's just like, you know what I mean? It doesn't speak to the moment that he was in, even though everything I was trying to say was at least coherent in my brain box, you know? So it's kind of knowing the situation that we're in, and I guess ultimately having some grace for the person on the other side of the thing, you know, and knowing that we're all at different points in the walk, and that God can speak through all of that, and he will.
I like that, because I do see a distinction between knowing, you know, like having certainty and assurance. And I think that's probably my biggest thing that I struggle being able to communicate. It's like, I tell people that why I feel I have insurance. That doesn't mean that I don't ever have doubt, or I think my tradition is the only one that is for sure the right one, which there's a lot of traditions that's just baked into their DNA. This is the one, you know? And if you sign up for that, you could maybe not buy into that certainty of that tradition that they may hold. but you could be on the outskirts, but still in it, still part of it. Um, so I knew that there's people in my tradition, same thing, but I think the core of my tradition isn't like that. Like it isn't, they come from more of a humble perspective on the overall way we're doing this as opposed to what was done and why we're grateful for it. And, God's using all of these arenas. Um, you know, I guess this is why I have such a hard time with the universal proposition is because it's just I just don't see it in the Bible. I if I was a really loving person, like where like it directed me, like a loving person meaning I'm just gonna let love override any kind of, like my idea of love and loving people to override every single thing that when I'm reading God say in the Bible. Um, it's I don't think that's what God's talking about when he's saying love, because sometimes love is brutal. Like, I mean, we know, right? I mean, genuine love, like what you did with your son. Explain, saying, listen, you're gonna get your scooter, you know, it ain't gonna be today. And today is a mission to pull information out of the guy so we can get a better handle so that we can get the best scooter for you. And it's like, okay, so this is a bit of a game. That's how this game's played out here in the world. This guy's trying to make money. We're trying to get information. You know what I mean? But it's like when you bring in the, loving your neighbor, we bring all this baggage in what we think love is. It's like, I think love means, understanding where the other person's coming from. That's true, right? What their goal is. So you can. But like in this situation, I don't think your son probably felt like there was much love going on from his perspective, right? Like he had his agenda. And it's almost like we forgot that in that story. Like his agenda was ultimately getting a scooter and seeing a step towards that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like all these angles of love. Your love is, the responsible love, the love of, you know, holding back a little bit, getting prepared to pull the trigger on it ultimately because I want you to get the best thing you can get for the money that I have, if it's your money or his money or whatever. So, yeah, I guess what I'm basically saying is that my struggle comes always from I'm always trying to put myself in other people's shoes, but it's hard when their perspectives are I sometimes I feel like their perspectives in their mind have taken hierarchy over my perspectives. And again, I guess that's human nature. I understand that. But I do like the idea of um, being humble in what we think we know. Um, it's like there's certain things. It's like the assurance I have in my salvation is not the same as the assurance I have in all this stuff in theology, right? Like I leave space for the magnificent and depending on how you use the term mystical, these special places that God arrives and does something miraculous that blows your particular personal mind, and it may even blow a few people in your sphere's mind with a particular situation. I think that's so special. Like, gosh, God draws so close to people in those moments. But
Mm.
proper orientation, right? It's like, sometimes it is a sign I should go to Atlanta. Or sometimes I'm thinking, God, show me a sign. And should I go to Atlanta? And a truck happens to pull up and their distributorship is from Atlanta. And it isn't a sign. It's just a truck that's based out of Atlanta. You know, it's just a stupid, like, I'm so dumb sometimes with like that. But that's where I was. I was like, everything's a sign. I have to always be on the lookout. It's kind of like you buy a white car, a white Honda, and then all of a sudden you see all the white Hondas on the road.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's what
I do agree with that, and I've actually experienced something similar to that over the last couple days in my involvement on this side of the screen now. I feel like I've kind of hit an equilibrium a little bit where, all my initial thoughts kind of being in, getting so high-minded, checking my counts, doing all this stuff. Like, it takes a minute with new insight to integrate it, right? In order to kind of fold it in. It's no different. I the thought that came to my mind was like when you're mixing cake batter. At the beginning, it's like the dry ingredients and the eggs, and some of it's clumpier. But as you keep kind of working it, it then smooths out and finds its proper place amongst the multiplicity, right? And then you give it a little heat, and the next thing you know, you got some delicious cake, you know? And so I think that, maybe, and I'm just thinking this now, these are different ingredients to the Jesus cake, right? Because we are so incapable of fully understanding the the bounty that is a God that can create a tree and an ecosystem and insects for a creature that he wants to commune with. Like the idea that we're going to have all those pieces in place in a perfect fashion. The flour's job in the cake is to just be the flour, right? It doesn't have to I mean, we have to change, we have to be transformed, right? But transformed in a way that it still remains human. And so, for our Orthodox friends, I think they have an understanding of that maybe some of us on the side of logic, as opposed to mystical. I'm not trying to say that to be disparaging in any way, right? But and I know that my experience with different kind of perspectives has enriched my life, right? And yeah, I think that's good. But I gotta go too, man. I'm sorry to steal the last word from you.
No, you're good. I got another 15 minutes I can mess around with. Maybe Olson will jump in and screw around with me.
Okay.
So anyway, have a good day at work, brother. Thank you for sharing all that. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Take it easy.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like what he was saying. I think the greatest part about an open mind, being open-minded, is the ultimate goal of being open-minded is to close it around something. You don't just perpetually, eternally have an open mind. For instance, I can be open-minded on which computer to buy, right? And as I learn information, as I glean things, ultimately I'm going to close my mind around something. And then the experience of that something is going to either confirm or it's going to reject my initial thoughts on it. And it could force me to have to reevaluate it. But the difference in my religion, and again, we're using that word, my walk with Christ, is that he has brought me through places. He's brought me through very wooey places. He's brought me through very strict places, and evaluating all those things and then actually starting to read the Bible and realizing that a lot of this has been misrepresented in a lot of aspects, overly over and above the way that those particular traditions have messed around with it, and I find that interesting. What's up, Olson? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm just here for the moral support. Keep going.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I just think it's cool because I'm trying to. I obviously there's a lot of traditions. I think it's what I love about the high church is I love the idea of doing something that people have done for thousands of years. That's so cool, right? To be part of that. So I can, when I hear Luke and him getting emotional about the idea of um, a kid and, wanting his kids to be able to sing the same songs and, and have this history, it's really cool. But when that becomes the thing, like that's the thing that tends to be a problem, and I don't want, it's like even in my tradition, I don't want, I mean, I guess we could probably be accused of over, I don't know whether maybe too much theology. Is that what do you, I don't know what people would accuse somebody who's a reformer. I guess there's just a lot of different sects of reform, so
Yeah.
it could go any different way.
That reminds me of the old country song. What's that? Too much fun. What's that mean? Yeah, too much theologies. You can't have it.
Yeah,
It's too fun.
I don't
Just
know.
kidding. You probably
Yeah,
could.
yeah. I mean, I mean, all I'm trying to do is figure these things out, and have balance in all of it. Um, when I first started watching the TLC, for instance, I would get like so frustrated. I'm why isn't this person like their background, what they say they are as far as their tradition. It's like why don't they just say what they mean? Like they're not being honest about what they believe. And this was on my side and on the other side. So I was always like, you know, like you're Catholic. You say you're a Catholic. Say the Catholic thing. You know what you believe. And then same with the somebody who's a Calvinist or whatever. It's like, dude, that's not accurate. Why wouldn't you say something? You know what I mean? Like, it's like I was all confused, and then I was like, well, is this evangelism space? What is this? What do you mean church adjacent? What does that mean? So it's like, okay, we're all kind of like coming into this estuary, right? From all these different streams, the salt, the fresh, and
Some of us are a little more salty than others.
exactly. I'm one of them, but I know what you mean. But yeah, um, so I guess the hardest part about this is learning how to communicate with the people. It's like the TLC obviously is more important to me than say like the stranger. Of course, I would say that's probably accurate, right? Um, because I have more interaction with the TLC than I do strangers, right? I mean strangers meaning like the other stream the other day about homeless people. But I get benefits out of homeless people, a conversation with them. It's fascinating to me. But if I put the work in, if I put the effort in, the risk of this person either being a crazy person, and starting screaming at me, you know, because they're schizophrenic and they can't socially communicate, or it being a genuine conversation with somebody that's actually has a deep need, and is like showing up to our church service in Fort Pierce. It's like that's so cool. Like he's seeking, you know, and hearing where he's coming from and his background and all that stuff. Um, Family's obviously a harder one. Immediate family's different, right? I mean, like your wife, your kids, that sort of thing. I mean, it's kind of like your crew, if you were to put it in like opposition terms, your crew against the rest of the world, like your unit is gonna be tight above and beyond everything else, And I feel the same way in church communities, and I feel the same way in TLC communities. Like if anybody were to, when they're critical about the TLC, it's like, dude, like you don't fully grasp this, like, that's not what this is, and maybe I don't know what this is. And same with workspace. What do you think of those 5 categories?
I know you're
Work,
like going through five
yeah,
categories, so I wasn't
TLC,
tracking that way. Yeah.
TLC, work, family, strangers, and church. And how our
Hmm.
relationships are, how we build relationships in all those spaces, and does it matter having one as more important than the other?
Mm, okay. So does so in these like different spaces, having a hierarchy of relational importance, is that a thing? Um, I think it's definitely a thing. Like in most how most people interact with the world and their surroundings, that's definitely a thing, right? Family, right, is obviously a big one that people are going to prioritize above others. Some people will prioritize certain friendships above family, and they say that this is my new family. This is more meaningful to me. Um, but in that same way, they're still making like a kin unit, whether it's by blood or by choice, they're still making that. Like you were saying, like these are my people. These are my tribe. Um, so I do think like we live that out. Is is that necessarily 100% the biblical? I wrestle with that a lot. Um, so like I said, I live out family, right? If if it's between my wife and you getting a piece of bread, I'm probably gonna make sure my wife gets the piece of bread. Sorry. But um, but right, like Jesus says, is his family's coming to question him because they're like, "Hey, you're talking like a crazy guy. Let's get you out of here." He's like, "Who are my brothers and sisters? Right? These are my brothers and sisters." And then, right, as Christians in the early churches, as they're choosing to be Christians, really had a deep impact on their family life. They were choosing their Christian faith and their that above their familial connections and ties because sometimes that cost them that. And you still see that in a lot of parts of the world today, right? A lot of the Islamic and Hindu parts of the world, if a person becomes a Christian, then their family ties go away, right? And so then they have to make new ties, right? So the fact that we have it so comfy here, I think allows us to organize here being our Western society allows us to organize those hierarchies in a certain way. I think in different contexts we might organize those hierarchies slightly differently. I
That's a
don't know.
good point. Yeah, and I was just thinking about, obviously you have a duty, and I don't think I'd want to even be your friend if you didn't want to feed your wife first. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
Like that,
mhm.
because of that, I understand that it would be ludicrous. And I don't think you'd want to be my friend if I was asking you to do such a thing. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like,
Mhm.
and the self-sacrificing aspect of that. But I do think that is an interesting verse you bring up with the whole, I remember, and again, this was probably the hardest part of my tradition, because this is how I read it. This is how I read it. The idea that there's a chance that people in my family may not get called to Christ terrifies me. like terrifies me in a sad sense, and so on one hand, I would say, no, man, God wouldn't do that, well, it isn't God doing anything, people get what they ultimately want, and I don't know where their heart is, you know but I also don't think that I'm going to be upset if I get to heaven and I find out one of my parents isn't there, or um so anybody in my my family that I love deeply isn't there, because I know he's just, and if that person isn't there, there's a reason why they're not there. It isn't because he's a just God. That's the hardest part about my tradition that people probably struggle with the most. They just can't accept that. And I think that's why the universal belief structure is so appealing, because I just can't imagine a God that wouldn't want everybody to end up there. It's like, well, like, what you do you like is a just God going to let everybody in? How would that be just? So then it's the distinction of what qualifies. Now we know the gospel, we understand what the official qualification is. It's just the idea that I can say, for me, I'm so much better than the guy across the street that makes a decision to believe this gospel, as opposed to him putting grace on my heart to even care about believing in this gospel. You know, I mean, I just don't see me being better than that guy. I'm not better. I'm just as bad as him. And so that's why I feel like I have that proper orientation of understanding that I'm not any better, and that is a humble thought process. So the idea of people thinking, "Oh, you're just walking around thinking you're chosen." No, this is not a boastful thing. I'm going to continue to talk to that guy across the street and hope that God transforms his heart and uses that as a seed that is planted deep in his heart, that explodes into the grace that he wants to show in the world and through this person, you know? And that's a hard pill to swallow. So I definitely don't begrudge people like that in that way about one tradition over another. I understand the appeal, even in the mystical stuff, like I understand the appeal, you know, especially if I was wired or orientated that way, like I'm more poetic, I'm more artistic, you know, symbolism so cool, like, oh, I just love it, ooh, yeah, okay, cool, that's how you're wired. But I also don't
Hmm.
want it to become the thing, just like
Hmm.
I don't, I hope I'm wrong in my theology. Luckily, I don't, my theology doesn't say that I'm going to hell because I think that way, or because I might be wrong. And that's the thing that worries me the most about traditions, or people in certain traditions that take such a hard stance saying, no, you believe that, you're going to hell. Are we Christians or not? you know am I going to heaven? You don't think so? Like, that type of thing, like brass tack stuff. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry if I rambled on at
Thoughts?
the end there.
No, no, it's your show. It's a good thought. You were wanting to get that out, so
Yeah,
awesome.
I'd like to
Glad you
talk
got to
more
it.
about the relationship stuff. I think it's really important, and what we're doing here is really important. So maybe
Yeah.
we'll have to dive in deeper. You gonna do tomorrow, or Scott?
I have no idea. We'll be my people will contact your people.
There we go. All right, I'll see you on Chris Howard's,
All right.
brother.
See. Yeah, I gotta get going to work early. It's the boys' last day of school, so I'm gonna try to get home early for that.
Nice. Thanks,
Yeah.
Olson.